You won't believe how talented this family's kids are. Robert, the youngest, conducts orchestras. David, the oldest, paints. Rosie, the youngest daughter, shines as a dance star. And Amy, the eldest, is an executive at an ad agency. They owe their success to 1,000,000 feet of wiring, and after the train stopped, Frank hailed a cab. Frank wanted to surprise David, but after a long doorbell ring, no one answered and lucky. Let's just admit, the lady he encountered while waiting for David exhibited an incredible amount of patience. You know, he had been waiting for an extended period of time, yet David hadn't returned. Eventually, Frank resigned himself to finding a motel. Passing a gallery, he spotted one of David's pieces and found himself reminiscing about a conversation. The next morning, Frank waited outside like for a lost sock, but didn't see David. He stuffed the letter through the door slot. Raising kids is genuinely like a heartfelt journey full of parents' love and hopes. Frank used to watch his kids grow day by day. They lit up each child's path like brilliant stars, and now it's Frank's turn to need some of that heartwarming affection from his kids. At last, Frank arrived at his eldest daughter Amy's place of financial power is off the charts. His grandkid Jake was there to greet him. Jake was surprised by Grandpa's visit, but rushed off for an online class. Meanwhile, Amy multitasked at the pool, chatting about work. Watching his daughter work so hard, Frank thought, well, this is my little Amy from back in the day. Now she has a puzzled frown. When Frank asked about her husband Jeff, Amy's expression instantly stiffened. She was all over the place like a cat on a hot tin roof. Amy was shocked Dad took a bus to Chicago. Seeing Jake, she excitedly insisted Grandpa join for golf. Jake's golfing stance was impressive. He was certainly a natural. However, Frank looked slightly anxious in front of his grandson. The grandsons hadn't had a good chat in a while, and really caught up, but Amy was dodging something while on the phone. Frank asked Jake about his grades, but it turned out to be nowhere near as stellar as Amy claimed. Talk about misleading information. Dinner with the family was slightly awkward, especially with the chopsticks. Frank wasn't adept at them at all, so Amy handed him a fork with a sigh of relief. But when Amy requested Jake to hand the hot sauce over to Jeff, surprisingly, Jake deliberately chose to contradict his father. As a result, the dinner table transformed into a heated battle of wits and words. This turned the situation into a cringe-fest for Amy. She asked about Frank's travel plans, and he casually mentioned he'd be here for a day or two, such a breeze, but Amy grinned about a crunching schedule and simply couldn't manage it. But Jeff had to head out of town, and Jake had a training camp to attend. Their schedule was so tight, leaving no extra time for Frank at all. Frank saw the kids had their fair share of issues, but didn't call Amy out on it. Instead, he suggested heading to see Robert the next day. But his father stopped him, Frank hoping for a surprise. Though Amy agreed initially, the siblings called instead at night. The oldest, David, had some trouble brewing in Mexico, and everyone knew they didn't want their father worrying about that. Next morning, Frank took photos in the villa, including a family portrait. Too funny. No matter what, Jake refused to stand next to his dad. Looking at the family forcing smiles for a picture, Frank felt a storm brewing inside. Amy invited her dad to tour her office. If Frank saw a photo op, he insisted on snapping one at his daughter's company. Two young folks were brainstorming for Nad's campaign. When they found out Frank was Amy's dad, they politely sought his input, which made his heart despite feeling proud. Frank didn't say much, he just smiled warmly. At the station, Amy was buzzing around, kindly snagging a coffee for her dad. While chatting, she bumped into her colleague Tom. Tom was the creative director. Amy introduced him to her dad, inviting them for coffee. Before leaving, Frank pulled out the letters. These letters were thoughtfully prepared in advance specifically for his kids. Frank inquired about the kids' well-being with deep concern to Amy, because their happiness is what truly matters most, even though he inevitably had his own worries. After bidding Amy farewell, Frank geared up for his next leg, Denver, where Robert had a music gig. Along the way, Frank soaked in the varied scenery, capturing each moment like every child was a precious seed he nurtured. Some flowers bloomed quickly, while others take ages to sprout. Upon arriving in Denver, Frank was immediately drawn to the street full of band advertisements and eagerly begged strangers for selfies. After some detective work, Frank finally found Robert's venue, but it wasn't quite what he expected. Robert claimed to be a conductor, but to Frank, he was a drummer. A plot twist. Frank felt a twinge of disappointment, and when Robert showed up, he was shocked to learn that his son was just a free-spirited percussionist. After rehearsal, they had a heart-to-heart. Robert never claimed to be a conductor. Frank hardly cared about the kids for years. Robert loved percussion. Being a drummer was stress-free, and he got to travel the globe performing. Upon hearing this, Frank's mood grew somewhat heavy. After all, he had initially hoped that Robert would pursue further education and had expressed his willingness to support him yet Robert firmly and resolutely declined. Every parent harbors dreams of their children becoming successful, yet not every kid is predestined for greatness. Perhaps discovering joy in the ordinary is the most genuine form of happiness. Frank wanted to see Robert's performance, but Robert's next was in Europe, busy training, unable to spend time with him. Frank grew anxious, wondering why Robert wandered years without a girlfriend. But Frank had faith that Amy would call him up. Just remember to keep that chat going. Everyone was eagerly anticipating the next family reunion moment, but if she happens to forget, you must remind her at the right time to ensure no one gets left behind. I will. Are you happy? Happy? Absolutely. Of course I'm happy. I wake up every day to the sound of a bass drum. Before leaving, Frank asked again if his son was happy. Even though he was grown up and independent, it still mattered.